If you're a new or a returning player to Albion Online, this is the guide you need to follow in order to progress your character really fast. Now, for this guide, I'm going to be using my old character, which is around 2 hours old. So this should be pretty similar to what a new player's character is like. Now, let's jump into the video. Now, as soon as you walk into the world of Albion, the first thing you will notice is the variety of builds that people use. You can see that this person's using a mace, this person's using a sword, this person's using an axe. See, everyone has their own weapon. In fact, there's literally hundreds of weapons in this game. So, a lot of people get confused or troubled on which weapon to choose. So in my personal recommendation, I would say use a cursed staff, because cursed staffs are all around one of the best weapon classes in the game, if not the best in my opinion. You can never go wrong with a cursed staff. There's not a single type of content in the entire game that does not need a cursed staff to finish. So for an example, take 1v1 PvP. Cursed staffs in general are awesome in PvP. Especially in 1v1 PvP, this is one of the best weapons in the game. And in a ZvZ, like a war with two alliances, 200 players on each side, cursed staffs are still very good in that content too. There's a staff called the Damnation Staff, which is amazing for that content. So yeah, pick a cursed staff if you want my recommendation. If you don't want to pick a cursed staff, that's fine. You can pick whatever weapon you want to. Now coming to the armor pieces, I'm using a hunter hood, mercenary jacket, and guardian boots. Now the main reason for using these armor pieces is because they are cheap and they are good. That's all there is to it. There's not very complicated reason for it. Just use the hunter hood with these spells on screen. Mercenary jacket, same thing. Guardian boots, same thing. Okay. Now coming to your offhand, you have to start with tomes. So what do you mean by starting with tomes? The first offhand that you want to level is the tome of spells, which is in the mage category here. Now the reason why you want to level up tome of spells is to eventually be able to use Emuisac. Emuisac is the best beginner's offhand at the early game because it boosts your damage by a percentage, and it does not have any noticeable defects for using it. The only problem with it is it makes your spells cost a little bit more energy, but that's not a big deal when you're using a tier 4 staff. Okay, since we have decided on what build we are using, now let's decide on what type of content you want to do for progressing your character as fast as possible. Now the type of content you do is decided based on your reaver level. The reaver level starts at tier 3 and ends at tier 8. Okay, that is fairly simple, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Now if you are a brand new character that just started the game, you are probably at tier 3 or tier 4. So if you are at tier 4, go to a tier 4 zone and kill open world mobs until you reach tier 5. If you are at tier 5, go to a tier 5 zone and kill until you reach tier 6. And if you are at tier 6, go to a tier 6 zone and stay there. Don't move up to tier 7 or tier 8 just yet because they are quite difficult for your level. Alright? Now the first short-term goal is to reach tier 6 reaver for you, and I will show you guys how to do that shortly. Now before I show you that, another short-term goal that you have to follow is faction flagging. Now when you click on this faction merchant in Earning City, you'll see that it requires 157,000 fame to enlist. So this is your first goal. You want to hit this as soon as possible because this will give you insane rewards. Okay, so what did we go through so far? We got a build and we decided on what to do. Now check your destiny board to see what river level you are at and go to the type of zone. In my case, I'm at tier 5 river, so I will go to a tier 5 zone which is a little further from the city, so there's not as much traffic from the people. I'll go to Canfidare here and do my farming there. Alright guys, I'll see you guys in that zone. Okay, now we are in the tier 5 zone that's a little further away from the city so that we don't have much traffic. Now as soon as you come into the zone, you will see monsters like this walking around. Monsters are just mobs. Your goal is to kill as many of them as possible, so you get their fame and silver. See, we just killed this guy, we got 1800 fame and 359 silver. This will level you up really fast, and you also get some really nice silver for doing it too. Now as you can see, these guys are everywhere. Wherever you go in the open world, you'll find like 10 of them at every turn. Okay, so let me check my fame real quick. I'm at 100k fame. Our goal was 157k to unlock faction flag, right? Now I'm not going to be doing this until I unlock it, because there's really no point in me for doing it because I already have other characters. But basically, you guys just come out to this zone and keep blasting until you get some good stuff. Right, see, I just got a 10k worth crossbow. I'm at 13,000. Now I had already had this, so I'll destroy it just to not affect the silver. See, 100k where I'm at now. Still at 100k. Okay, just walk around in the open world and kill anything you see. There's 2 more here. Now the most important thing that you have to remember now is never go into dungeons. Dungeons are absolute garbage. It's a relic of the past in this game. So once upon a time, dungeons were amazing in the safe zones, but right now they're absolutely terrible. Dungeons only get good at tier 8 and tier 7, which we cannot do right now. So for the time being, come to a zone that matches your river level and kill everything on sight. That's all you want to do. Okay, see, I'm at 108k now. So reaching 150k is not a big deal. It will take you like 1 to 1.5 hours until you unlock 150k, and you just have to grind it out a little bit. Come to this zone, beat everything you see up, and yeah, you'll be a tier 5 or tier 6 river in no time. Now let's cut forward to after you achieve tier 6 river. I'll show you guys what you have to do and what you can expect to do at that level. Alright guys, now that we have tier 8 river unlocked, for this I'm using my main account to simulate all the farming you have to do in order to get to tier 8 river. Now that you are at tier 8 river, here is the content that you want to be doing until you have enough silver to do whatever you want. Okay, now this is a silver farm for new players that have unlocked tier 8 river. Now tier 8 river sounds like it's a big deal, but you can unlock it in a single day or 2 days if you really grind those tier 6 open world mobs that I told you about earlier. Now when you're in tier 8, you want to buy solo tier 8 dungeons. Each cost around 20 to 25,000, and they're pretty safe considering that they're in the black zones. Now what you want to be doing is come to the portal city, buy a tier 8 solo dungeon map, use it. Now before you go, you have to take the invisibility shrine buff. Okay, I'll get some potions just in case. Okay, I have 1 potion just in case we have a PvP encounter. And as I told you before, our build is made for PvP. This is amazing for 1v1 PvPs. So if it's just one guy that is invading you, you don't have to be afraid, you can just beat him up. Alright? Now, before you go into the black zone that is here, you have to take this buff that makes you and your horse invisible, so that you don't get ganked by any hostile players. Okay, now we are at our dungeon. So the difference between our dungeons and the normal dungeons is that our dungeons have these butterflies flowing around them because they're a map dungeon. Now as soon as you enter, the butterflies will disappear, so no one else will know that this is a map dungeon. Okay, now that we have entered our dungeon, you have to stay in your PvP spells and click the logout button and wait till this reaches 210, because that will be 90 seconds, and after 90 seconds the dungeon will close from outside and it will not allow anyone to come into your dungeon and kill you. Okay, alright, now as you can see the countdown is less than 210, which means that no one is able to enter our dungeon from this point on. Now in this point you have to switch to your PvE spells that are more optimized for clearing mobs, eat your food buff and proceed with your dungeon. Now when you are doing solo dungeons, you will find these random green shrines. If you interact with them, it will give you one of 3 random buffs. The first one is a damage boost that increases your damage by a lot, and it also has a really nice movement speed buff. The second is a health regen buff. It creates an aura around you that regenerates your health. And the last one is a cooldown reduction buff that also increases your energy regeneration. Now this is the health regen buff. You can see my health going up constantly and it lasts for around 1 minute. All the buffs have a similar active time if I'm not mistaken. So when you see those shrines in your dungeon, always pick them up. They can be a huge advantage if you are on a really low IP set. Alright guys, now I have done some dungeons, 30 red ones, but I did not get any good loot to show for you in this 2 dungeons I have done, and I really don't have enough time to film for more. So I'm going to stop here, but I have some videos on my channel on how much loot you can get on an average per hour. So go and refer to those videos if you want to know how much loot you can get from T-Rate solo dungeons. Alright everyone, now that we have talked about a silver farm in the form of solo dungeons and open world mobs, now let's talk about a passive silver source. Now what is a passive silver source? In a passive silver source, you invest minimum amount of time and it gives you some silver over the course of a day or a few days. Now in my course, this is crafting these elite winter bears. I get these bears from faction flagging. I have told you about faction flagging at the start of the video. Now if you faction flag and do your content in the red zones or any safe zone, you will get faction points, and you can use those faction points to purchase these babies. And when you keep these babies in a kennel and feed them for like a week, they will grow up into elite bears, and these elite bears are really expensive. So for making this elite bear, it costs me around 400,000 or 500,000 on food. After I feed it that 400 and 500,000 food in the span of a week, each bear will go for 3.5 to 4 million silver. Now that's all it costs me, around 300k or 400k to feed the food, and after that you get a massive profit of 3 or 4 million per bear. Now just imagine how much profit you can make over a whole month while doing this. So each bear takes around 1 week to grow, and we have 4 of them here, and in 1 month we can do 4 cycles of it. That's 16 bears, and 16 bears and all multiplied by 3.5 or 4 million silver. So that's a huge amount of silver, and I can definitely buy and sustain my premium only by making these bears. I don't even have to play the game. Just log in, grind faction points, buy the bears, place them here and log off. That's all I have to do for maintaining my premium. Okay, now this is a great passive income, and for this you have to be faction flagged when you are doing your content in the safe zones or red zones. Okay, Alright everyone, now that we have talked about silver farms and we have talked about passive incomes, now let's talk about another aspect of Albion that's completely different from combat and PvP. Okay, now let's look at gathering and refining. Now, refining can be done with the materials you buy from the market or the materials you gather. Now, for example, in order to refine a tier 4 steel bar, you need tier 3 bronze bars and tier 4 iron. Now, for crafting the bronze bar, you need this and this, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, all of these materials for the steel bar can be gathered by you using a tier 4 pickaxe. That's fairly simple, right? Now, if you want to make some good silver with your premium or your focus, you can gather your own materials and refine them into higher tiers of materials like this, and you can sell them on the market for a huge profit. But I'm not very experienced in this types of content, so I'm not going to give you my takes on it because I'm probably wrong when it comes to this stuff. So go to YouTube and search for gathering or crafting guides. I'm sure there's a lot of people who made guides on crafting and refining. So that's that for crafting and gathering. Alright everyone, now let's look at a roadmap on what to do and at what level you have to do that content. Now if you are interested in gathering, you have to bring gathering tools along this trip and do gathering as you progress your reaver level in different types of zones. Now at the start of the game, finish tier 3 reaver, go to a tier 4 zone, and you get the idea. Go to tier 6 zones and stay there until you unlock tier 8 reaver. Okay, after you have unlocked tier 8 reaver from the tier 6 zones, you have two options. You can stay in the tier 6 zone and continue your silver farming from the tier 6 zones, or if you're feeling a bit bored about this content, you can move on to tier 8 solo dungeons after you have unlocked tier 8 reaver. Now, after doing tier 8 solo dungeons, you have a bunch of silver. You can really do whatever you want to do, but I recommend buying into a set like this because with this set you can earn a lot of silver. I have earned hundreds of millions of silver by soloing group dungeons and static zones. That's not a proper endgame for this game, as this is just abusing the really strong items to farm content that's meant for groups, but I think this is the best activity you can do if you are a solo player without any guild. Okay, now we have finished PvE, we have finished silver farms, we have finished crafting, gathering and refining. The only aspect of this game that I have not talked about in this video is PvP. Now the main reason for why I'm not talking about PvP is because it is very different for each and every player. Every player has their own build, they have their own win rates, they have their own advantages and disadvantages. Me giving a general idea on how much you can make with PvP or what you have to do for being good at PvP is kind of impossible. So I'm not going to do that. If you want to do PvP, look up PvP build guides on YouTube and pick the meta ones because they're usually the best ones to do. Alright, now that's it for the video. Consider becoming a channel member if you want to support the channel. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.